My friends, let's talk about what happens when you finally stop chasing. When you stop trying to remind someone of your worth, stop texting just to check in. Stop sending signals that say, "I'm still here if you change your mind." When you remove your presence, the one they once had consistent access to you, shift the balance of power. Time is often misunderstood as a tool for revenge in relationships, as if stepping away and letting someone feel your absence is a way to make them suffer. But in reality, time isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. And the longer someone goes without you, the more clearly they begin to see what your presence truly meant. That clarity doesn't happen instantly. It unfolds gradually in the quiet moments when they expect you to still be there and you're not. When you walk away from someone who took you for granted, what you're really doing is handing them the opportunity to look inward. As long as you remain available emotionally, physically, or even through small gestures like liking their posts or checking in, they can avoid that reflection. They don't have to confront the consequences of their choices because your presence softens the loss. But once you step back, once you stop filling the emotional gap for them, they're left with silence. And silence is powerful. It makes them question things they didn't want to think about. This is where time starts to do its work, not on your schedule, and not always in the way you might expect. It doesn't necessarily trigger immediate regret or longing. But what it does do is expose the difference between convenience and connection. If your presence was merely convenient, they'll move on. But if your presence meant something, the longer they go without it, the more they feel the weight of that loss. They start to realize that the comfort they felt when you were around wasn't a given, it was a gift. And that's what time reveals not just to them, but to you as well. You begin to understand that your value doesn't increase because someone comes back. It increases because you stopped trying to prove it. By letting go, you stop investing your energy into someone who didn't recognize your worth in real time. And you begin reinvesting that energy into yourself, your healing, your peace, your boundaries. It's important to understand that this isn't about using time as some sort of emotional trick. You're not pulling away to teach them a lesson. You're not hoping they'll suffer in your absence. That mindset still keeps the focus on them. The real shift happens when you start to understand that detaching is about realignment. It's you choosing to step out of a dynamic where your value had to be explained or defended. Time, then, becomes a natural byproduct of that decision. It becomes the space in which truths are exposed, and what they come to realize in that space, if they ever do, is that you weren't just someone who was nice to have around. You were the emotional backbone of the connection. You showed up. You cared deeply, you brought warmth, loyalty, presence, and because of how consistent you were, they might have confused your availability with permanence. But once that consistency is gone, once the effort is no longer flowing toward them, they are left with a silence that says more than your words ever could. I'm done handing you what you didn't know how to hold. The mirror of time is clean and honest. It doesn't filter the past through ego or excuses. It simply reflects. If they miss you, it's not because you tried to make them miss you. It's because they now have to live without what they once had easy access to. They have to sit in their own decisions, and that discomfort, that realization, is what hurts. You don't need to rush the process. You don't need to wonder if they've figured it out yet. That's not your job anymore. Your only job is to stay grounded in your decision to let go, to trust that if your presence was ever truly valuable, it will echo in your absence, and if it doesn't, then the silence was your answer all along. Letting time pass isn't about making them pay. It's about giving both of you the space to confront the truth. Time isn't the enemy, it's the revealer, and in that mirror, the one who let go too late will see sometimes painfully exactly what they lost. Distance has a way of clarifying things that closeness often clouds. When we're near someone physically, emotionally, or through constant communication, it's easy to blur the lines between connection and habit, between love and convenience. But when distance is introduced, especially after a breakup or a separation, the fog begins to lift. Without the daily contact, the routine messages, or the emotional reassurance, a person is left alone with their thoughts. That silence isn't empty, it's full of questions, and those questions create clarity. We often mistake emotional confusion for a lack of caring. We think that if someone isn't sure how they feel, they probably don't feel anything strong enough. But that's not always true. Sometimes people are emotionally overwhelmed, distracted, or even numb in the moment, unable to process what's really happening while they still have access to you. But when you step away and remove that access, they no longer have the ability to hide from their own uncertainty. The space forces a kind of confrontation. They have to ask themselves, do I miss them? Do I actually feel lighter without them? Or does this emptiness mean something deeper? This is why distance builds clarity, not because it manipulates someone into missing you, but because it separates them from their emotional autopilot. As long as you're present, texting, checking in, offering understanding, they don't have to think. They don't have to feel the consequences of emotional neglect or indecision. You're still there, so they still feel safe, even if they don't know what they want. But the moment you step back and stop filling in the gaps, those gaps become visible. They start to notice the quiet, and in that quiet, they either feel peace or pain. Both are powerful, but only one tells them they truly lost something meaningful. Clarity isn't about a dramatic moment of realization. More often, it comes gradually. It builds over days and weeks of missed conversations, of seeing your name less, of wondering how you're doing and whether you've moved on. And during that time, they may not be reaching out. They may not be showing signs of change, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Internally, they're running through memories. They're reevaluating the story they told themselves about the relationship. They're confronting what life feels like without you in it. That process can't happen while you're still emotionally available. It requires distance, and this distance isn't just for them, it's for you. When you pull back, you allow yourself to stop overanalyzing their every move, to stop seeking closure from someone who hasn't given it. You begin to build your own clarity. You start to recognize what you were carrying alone in the relationship, what parts of yourself you were compromising to stay close to someone who didn't meet you with the same energy. Distance lets you step outside the emotional noise and evaluate the dynamic more honestly. Were they really showing up for you? Did they appreciate your efforts? Or were you simply trying to hold everything together? It's important to note that this clarity isn't always mutual. Sometimes distance helps both people see the truth that love was there, but it wasn't being honored. Other times, it helps only one person grow while the other remains stuck. Either way, the distance served its purpose. It revealed the emotional reality, and that truth, however painful, is a gift. For the person who took you for granted, distance is often the only condition under which they begin to understand your worth. They can't see it when you're still there, giving and waiting and hoping. But when you stop showing up, when you stop being an emotional safety net, they are left with the weight of their choices. The longer they go without you, the more they feel what they dismissed. If what you offered was real, they'll begin to feel that absence like a shadow that follows them in their routines, their memories, and their emotions. Distance isn't confusion. It's not a pause in the story. It's the most honest chapter. It's where emotions are sorted, truths are revealed, and illusions fall away. The silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means everything that needs to happen finally can. And in that space, one of two things will emerge: either the realization that they lost someone rare, or the freedom to let go completely. Either way, you win, because clarity, even when it hurts, is always better than confusion. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood actions in relationships. It's often perceived as cold, punishing, or manipulative, as if by pulling away, you're trying to make the other person feel guilty or suffer. But real detachment isn't about revenge. It's not about teaching someone a lesson. It's about reclaiming your self-respect and emotional freedom. When you stop pouring your energy into someone who doesn't reciprocate or value it, you're not being cruel, you're being courageous. You're choosing yourself. There's a difference between acting out of pain and acting from a place of self-worth. When you detach with dignity, you're not slamming the door shut in anger or bitterness. You're simply saying, I no longer wish to invest in a dynamic that depletes me. You're no longer trying to prove your worth, explain your value, or win someone back through emotional effort, and that choice, while quiet, is powerful. It shifts the entire emotional balance. The energy that once flowed outward toward them is now being redirected inward toward your own healing, your own growth, your own peace. When someone is used to having emotional access to you, your detachment feels seismic. It's not the same as ignoring them or giving them the silent treatment. It's the absence of the emotional availability they once relied on. And that's what begins to stir discomfort in them, not because you're hurting them on purpose, but because they are now feeling the emptiness you used to fill. The realization that you're no longer there as a fallback, no longer offering the warmth they didn't know how to return, can hit deeply. But that pain is theirs to sit with. It's not yours to manage. You are not responsible for how someone feels once you've stepped away for your own well-being. You're not cruel for choosing peace over chaos. If your presence was taken for granted, your absence is simply the natural response to that imbalance. You didn't walk away to punish them, you walked away to stop punishing yourself. And in that process, something very important happens. You begin to rebuild your sense of power. We think power in a relationship comes from control, from being desired, being chosen, being missed. But real power is internal. It comes from knowing that your love, your energy, your presence is valuable, and you don't have to keep giving it to someone who doesn't know how to honor it. When you detach, you're not withholding affection to cause pain. You're simply recognizing that love given freely to the wrong person becomes self-abandonment, and you choose not to abandon yourself anymore. This is not about indifference. You may still care deeply. You may still think about them, miss them, or even hope they grow. But you no longer make their emotional journey your responsibility. That shift changes everything. Because the person who once leaned on your emotional generosity now has to face the discomfort of their own choices without your soothing presence to soften the consequences. If they feel the loss, it's not because you forced them to, it's because they finally have the space to feel it. That space is what they need to process what they never fully appreciated. And here's the part most people overlook. Detachment isn't about hoping they hurt. It's about finally accepting that healing yourself is more important than being understood or validated by them. It's about no longer begging for clarity or closure. You give those things to yourself. You learn that the most powerful form of peace comes not from getting them back, but from realizing you no longer want someone who only valued you when they were at risk of losing you. There's something profoundly freeing about reaching the point where you no longer need them to feel your absence to prove your worth. But if they do, if time and distance reveal to them what they had and lost, then let that be their truth to carry. You don't need to witness their regret to know your value. You already know it because you chose to walk away from someone who couldn't meet you where you stood. That decision, not their response, is what defines your strength. Detachment is not revenge. It's not a cold shoulder or a calculated move. It's a return to self. It's you deciding that your emotional energy is too precious to be poured into someone who only knew how to take. And if that realization breaks them over time, then it's not your doing, it's the echo of what they lost. Healing is often mistaken for getting even, but the truth is, Real healing has nothing to do with whether they hurt without you. It's not about watching them fall apart or hoping they regret everything they said or did. It's about coming back to yourself slowly, quietly, and intentionally. It's about choosing peace over chaos, self-worth over validation, and growth over chasing a story that no longer fits who you're becoming. When you let time pass and allow yourself to detach, it's not an act of revenge. It's an act of reclamation of your energy, your boundaries, and your identity. There's a moment that comes after heartbreak where you realize the most painful part wasn't that they left or that things ended, it was that you kept trying to make them see your value. You kept trying to remind them of what they had. You offered your love in pieces, hoping it would be enough to make them stay, enough to make them change. But eventually, you reach a point where you stop needing them to see you. You begin to understand that someone else's inability to appreciate your presence doesn't mean you were lacking, it means they weren't capable of meeting you where you stood. That's where healing begins, not with them crawling back, but with you no longer waiting for them to. Healing is when you stop rereading old messages, stop checking their social media, stop keeping the door open just in case. You realize that your future can't begin if you're still emotionally living in someone else's indecision. So you let time pass, you let the silence grow, and instead of fearing that silence, you begin to find comfort in it. You fill that space not with thoughts of them, but with the rebuilding of you. You begin doing things for yourself, not to prove anything to them, but because you deserve it. You take care of your body, your space, your goals. You reconnect with friends, passions, and pieces of yourself you lost while trying to hold the relationship together. And in that process, you stop asking, will they regret it? And start asking, how can I make today better for me? That shift is subtle but life-changing, because suddenly the power dynamic no longer revolves around whether they'll come back. You're not waiting to be chosen anymore, you're choosing yourself. Letting time do its work isn't about sitting back, arms folded, hoping they crumble without you. That's still about them, and as long as your healing is attached to their suffering, you're still giving them power. Real healing is when you can think about them without bitterness. When you can wish them well and mean it, not because you want them back, but because you've grown past the need to be angry. The goal isn't to be unbothered, it's to be free. You'll know you're healing when you no longer fantasize about proving your worth through their regret. When the idea of them realizing what they lost no longer satisfies you. Because by then, you've realized that their recognition isn't the validation you needed, your own is. You were the one who stayed up late trying to fix things. You were the one who gave effort, patience, and heart, and you're also the one who walked away when you knew you deserved better. That's not weakness, that's strength in its purest form, and maybe they will hurt. Maybe one day they'll sit in the silence, think of you, and feel the sting of what they let slip away. But if that day comes, it won't be your responsibility to fix it. It won't be your moment to step back in and offer comfort. Because healing has taken you somewhere new, to a place where you no longer need the story to end in reconciliation for it to have meaning. Your growth, your peace, and your freedom are the closure, if it must. Let them feel the weight of their choices in your absence, but don't wait around for that moment. Don't base your healing on whether they miss you. Heal because you're worth more than a love that made you feel small. Heal because you're building a life that no longer revolves around being seen by someone who refused to look deeper. The longer they go without you, the more they may hurt, but you, in that same time, will have already risen into someone they no longer even recognize. And that's the kind of healing that doesn't look back. This was never about making them hurt. It was never about playing games, pulling away to create absence, or hoping they'd feel the emptiness and come crawling back. This was about something far more powerful: choosing yourself, choosing silence over begging, peace over proving, and self worth over someone else's inability to see it. The longer they go without you, yes, they may hurt. They may finally realize the depth of what they had and how easily they let it slip through their fingers, but your healing doesn't hinge on that moment. You've already done the hard part. You stopped showing up where you weren't appreciated. You stopped pouring into a space that didn't pour back. You detached not to punish, but to protect your own soul. And in doing so, you created the space for clarity for them and, more importantly, for you. You stopped needing them to feel your worth because you finally began to feel it on your own. So let time do whatever it needs to do. Let them feel whatever they need to feel, but don't pause your growth waiting for that day. Keep walking, keep rising, keep healing, because the most powerful thing you can do is live a life that no longer requires their apology, only your own love, your own peace, and your own future. That's not revenge. That's freedom.